My son wrote to me, "You're not family, don't come on the cruise." The next day his cabin was cancelled and mine was upgraded to a suite. There are no words to describe the pain you feel when your own child discards you like an old piece of furniture. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. It was a Tuesday morning in Brooklyn, with the sun just peeking through the windows of my small apartment in Park Slope. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the aroma of the muffins I had baked for my grandchildren, just like I did every week. I was wearing my blue robe, the one my son Andrew gave me 5 years ago when he still called me Mom with affection. My hands were still damp from washing the dishes when I heard the ping of a text message. I thought it would be Andrew asking if I needed anything from the store, or maybe Caroline, my daughter-in-law, reminding me what time to pick up the kids from school. After all, I was the one who did the school runs every day, who made their after-school snacks, who looked after them when they had a fever. But when I read the message, I felt as if the floor had opened up beneath my feet. "Mom, I've been thinking and I think it's better if you don't come on the cruise. There are a lot of us already, and we want to have some private family time. Don't take it the wrong way." I stood there paralyzed, the phone trembling in my wrinkled hands. Tears began to well up uncontrollably, blurring the screen. I read the message once, twice, 3 times, hoping the words would change, that it was a cruel joke, that my 42-year-old son wasn't tossing me aside like a used napkin. With trembling fingers, I tried to call him, but it went straight to voicemail. My heart shattered. I texted back, "Andrew, I paid for half the trip, and the grandkids wanted me to come." His reply came back fast and cold as a slap in the face, "I'll pay you back next week. The kids will understand. We need our space, Mom." Space. From me? His mother. The woman who had raised him alone after his father left us when he was 12. The same woman who worked 2 jobs to pay for his college tuition, who sold my grandmother's jewelry for the down payment on his first apartment, who gave up my own life to be available every single time he needed me. I sank into a kitchen chair, at the same Formica table where we had eaten breakfast together for so many years. Where I taught him how to do his homework, where we celebrated his graduation, where he told me he was going to be a father. Now, that same table was a witness to my deepest humiliation. I vividly remembered the day we booked the cruise. It had been my idea, actually. "Let's all go to the Caribbean," I had said with excitement. "It'll be perfect for the grandkids to see the ocean, just like when you were little, Andrew." His eyes had lit up then, and Caroline had smiled, a smile I now realized was completely fake. "What a great idea, Helen," my daughter-in-law had said. "But are you sure you can afford it?" And I, like the fool I was, had assured them that yes, I had some savings put away. Money I had been saving to fix the leaks in my roof, to replace the washing machine that had been acting up for 2 years. I had paid without a second thought, $3,500. Half of the family trip I had dreamed of for so long. Because my greatest joy was imagining my grandchildren, Leo and Sophia, running along the ship's deck, telling me about their adventures, cuddling with me at night to listen to my stories. But now, sitting in that kitchen that smelled of loneliness and muffins that no one would come to eat, I realized something I had been refusing to see for months. This wasn't the first time they had pushed me aside. It wasn't the first time Caroline had made that annoyed face when I showed up at their house. It wasn't the first time Andrew had spoken to me as if I were a burden. I remembered last Christmas, when I arrived with gifts for everyone and Caroline whispered something in Andrew's ear. Afterward, they told me they had decided to celebrate alone, that it was better for the kids. I went home with my roast chicken and Christmas cookies, to eat alone in front of the television. I remembered when I broke my wrist last year. I called Andrew, crying in pain, and he told me he couldn't take me to the hospital because they had an important dinner. I had to take a cab, wait 4 hours in the emergency room, and come home in a cast, without a single person asking how I was. I remembered all the times Caroline had told me, with that fake smile, "Helen, don't you think it's time you got your own life? The kids are older now." As if loving my grandchildren was a character flaw, as if wanting to be close to my family was a sin. But this message, this direct and cruel rejection, was the straw that broke the camel's back. I stood up slowly, my knees aching more than ever. I walked to my bedroom, where on the nightstand I kept a photo of the 5 of us together in Prospect Park from last summer. Andrew had his arm around my shoulders, the kids were smiling with ice cream on their faces, and Caroline was posing perfectly, as always. What a beautiful lie that picture was. I picked up my phone again and dialed the number for the travel agency. My voice was barely a whisper when I spoke. "Good morning, my name is Helen Miller. I have a reservation for the Caribbean cruise leaving next Friday." "Yes, Mrs. Miller, I have it right here. How can I help you?" I want to make a change to my reservation." And in that moment, something ignited inside me. A small but fierce flame. A dignity I thought I had lost. I want to upgrade my cabin, I said, my voice firmer now. And I want to cancel the reservations for Andrew Miller and Caroline Johnson. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure, ma'am? For the first time in months, I smiled a real smile. Completely sure. That afternoon, while I waited for confirmation from the agency, I sat on the worn-out living room sofa, surrounded by photographs that now seemed like silent mockeries. Each image was a reminder of everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, everything I had lost on the altar of unconditional love. I picked up the photo from Leo's first communion. I was there, smiling, in the navy blue dress I had bought especially for the occasion. What you couldn't see in that picture was that I had worked overtime for 3 months to be able to buy him the bicycle he wanted so badly. I remembered the moment perfectly. When Leo opened the gift, his eyes lit up, but he immediately ran to Andrew shouting, "Dad, look what Grandma got me." Andrew barely looked up from his phone and muttered, "That's great, son." Caroline, on the other hand, approached me with that smile I was beginning to recognize as fake. "Helen, you shouldn't have spent so much money. We could have bought him the bike." But I knew the truth, they wouldn't have bought it for him. Because Leo had been asking for that bike for months, and they always told him, "We'll see, for your birthday, when we have the money." I got up and walked to the kitchen, where in a drawer I kept all the receipts, all the bills, all the evidence of my blind generosity. Invoices for Sophia's SAT prep tutor, $250 a month for 2 years. Andrew had told me it was temporary, just until things get better at work, Mom. That was 3 years ago. Bills for Leo's orthodontist, $3,000 that I paid in installments I was still finishing up. Our insurance doesn't cover the whole thing, Caroline had explained with tears in her eyes. And we don't want him to suffer with crooked teeth. I, who hadn't been to the dentist in over 5 years because I couldn't afford it, took money from my retirement account so my grandson could have a perfect smile. I also found the receipt for the car. When Andrew had his accident last year, his insurance didn't cover the full cost of the repairs. "Mom, I need the car for work. Without it, I can't get to the construction sites." And I, without hesitation, gave him my last $2,000 in savings. He promised he would pay me back in 2 months. I'm still waiting. But it wasn't just the money. It was the time, the life, the dignity that I had been losing drop by drop. I remembered when Caroline had Sophia and needed help. "Helen, could you stay for a few weeks? I just don't know how I'm going to manage on my own." Those few weeks turned into 6 months. 6 months of getting up at 3 in the morning for feedings, changing diapers, cleaning up spit up, while she slept. "I need to rest so I can breastfeed," she would say. And when I finally decided to go back to my own home because my knees couldn't take it anymore, Caroline said reproachfully, "I thought you were going to be a more present grandmother. My mother never would have abandoned us like this." Her mother lived in Ohio and visited once a year. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my notebook where I wrote down all my expenses. Page after page of numbers that told the story of my own financial ruin. The $5,000 for the down payment when they moved to Scarsdale. The $400 a month for Leo's daycare when he was little. The $200 for Andrew's car insurance, which was still under my name to make it cheaper. The $150 a month I gave them to help with expenses, because raising kids is so expensive, Mom. I did the math for the first time in my life. In the last 5 years, I had spent over $30,000 on my family. $30,000 out of a Social Security check of $1,200 a month. I had depleted my savings, postponed repairs on my apartment, and eaten lentil soup and rice for months to give them everything they asked for. And when I needed help, when I had my gallbladder removed last year, where were they? Andrew came to see me once in the hospital, for 5 minutes, because he had an important meeting. Caroline never showed up at all. I can't bring the kids to a hospital, Helen. You know what those places are like, full of germs. My neighbors from the 5th floor, the sisters Connie and Pilar, women I barely knew, were the ones who brought me groceries that week. They were the ones who stayed with me the first night home, just in case I needed anything. 2 strangers showed more love than my own flesh and blood. The phone rang. It was Andrew. "Mom, have you talked to the agency yet? Are they going to refund the money?" He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I was sad. He only cared about confirming that I wouldn't interfere with their perfect vacation. "Yes, Andrew. I already spoke with them." "Perfect. Look, Caroline is a little on edge because she thought you were going to be difficult about this. You know how she is, she worries a lot." "Caroline worries? The same Caroline who never asked how I was? The one who told me last month that it was time for me to get a life when I suggested we could go to the farmer's market together?" "Andrew," I said, with a calm that surprised even me, "do you remember when you were little and you used to tell me that when you grew up, you would take care of me like I took care of you?" There was an awkward silence. "Mom, all kids say that. Besides, you know we love you very much, but we're an independent family now. You can't expect us to be like we were before. Like before? When I was useful. When they needed a free babysitter, a no-interest savings account, a grandmother who solved all their problems. Of course, son. I understand now. Are you okay? You sound weird. For the first time in years, I decided to be honest. No, Andrew. I'm not okay. But that's not your problem anymore, is it? I hung up before he could answer. That night, while I ate a simple omelette that tasted like cardboard, I found a letter at the bottom of a drawer that I had written years ago and never sent. It was to my sister Maria, who lives in Mexico City. In that letter, I told her all my fears, the fear of being a bother, the fear of being left alone, the fear that my son would forget me if I wasn't always available, always generous, always silent. I'm afraid that if I say no, just once, they'll stop loving me, I had written in a shaky hand. I'm afraid of being a burden. I'd rather give them everything I have than have them think I'm selfish. How prophetic that letter had been. I had given everything, absolutely everything, and they had still discarded me. Not for being selfish, but for simply existing. Maria had always warned me during our video calls, Helen, those grandchildren are not your children. And Andrew is a grown man. You have to live your own life. But I didn't listen. I thought she didn't understand, that she was jealous of my close relationship with my son. Now I realized that Maria had seen what I refused to acknowledge, that I was being used. I remembered the last time I tried to talk to Andrew about my loneliness. It was in December, after spending Christmas Eve alone because they had decided to go to Caroline's parents' house in Ohio. It's just easier for the kids, they had said. Son, I've been feeling very lonely lately. Could we see each other more often? Not for anything special, just to talk, like we used to. His response was like a stab wound. Mom, it's not just you and me anymore. I have a family now. I can't come running to see you every time you feel lonely. You need to make your own friends. My own friends. As if it were so easy to make friends at 68. As if I hadn't spent the last 15 years dedicating my body and soul to being the perfect grandmother, sacrificing my own relationships and hobbies. That night, I went to bed with a decision made. The next day I would go to the travel agency, not just to confirm my upgraded reservation, but to do something I had been putting off for years, live my own life. For the first time in decades, I fell asleep without worrying if Andrew needed anything, without checking my phone in case Caroline had sent me a message, without feeling guilty for not being available for everyone else. I fell asleep thinking about me. The next morning dawned gray, as if the New York sky had decided to echo my mood. I got up earlier than usual, not because I was in a hurry, but because sleep had fled from me like everything else in my life. As I made coffee, my mind began to unearth memories I had buried under layers of excuses and self-deception. I vividly remembered my last birthday, my 68th. I had waited all day for a call, a text, a visit. Nothing. At 9 o'clock at night, when I had lost all hope, I received a voice message from Caroline. Oh, Helen. We completely forgot about your birthday. Leo had soccer and Sophia had dance, you know how it is. Happy belated. She hadn't even bothered to record it in private. I could hear the TV and the kids shouting in the background. Andrew had sent a text at 11 that night, happy birthday mom. The day got away from me. I'll call you tomorrow. That tomorrow never came. But what hurt the most was stumbling upon the pictures they had posted on Instagram that same day. They had been at the mall all afternoon, buying new sneakers for Leo. In one of the photos, Caroline posed smiling with several shopping bags in her hands. Family shopping day, she had written. Family. Without me. On my birthday. As I stirred my coffee, I also remembered the day I broke my ankle last winter. I had slipped on some ice on the stoop, and a neighbor helped me get to the hospital. From the ER, I called Andrew, crying from pain and fear. Mom, can't you just call an ambulance? We're having dinner with Caroline's bosses and we can't just leave. It's important for her promotion. But son, I'm alone and I can't even walk. Look, it's not a big deal. I'm sure it's just a sprain. Take some ibuprofen and we'll go to the doctor tomorrow. I spent 3 hours waiting in the ER, surrounded by strangers who showed more compassion than my own family. A nurse named Rosa stayed with me during her break, holding my hand while we waited for the X-ray results. Is your family on the way? She asked. Yes, I lied, because it was less painful than admitting the truth. When I was finally discharged with crutches and a brace I had to wear for 3 weeks, I had to take a cab home. The driver, an older man named Pepe, helped me up the stairs to my apartment. Do you have someone to look after you tonight, ma'am? He asked with genuine concern. I lied again. That night, as I struggled to get to the bathroom on crutches, Andrew sent me a text. How's the foot? Hope it's nothing serious. Not one call. Not one visit. Not one question about whether I needed help. But the small humiliations, those daily microaggressions, were perhaps worse than the major oversights. Like when Caroline would say in front of others, "Helen always has an opinion on everything. You know how mothers are." Or when Andrew would say every time I suggested a plan, "Oh, Mom, not another one of your ideas." I especially remembered that day at the park, when I was playing with Leo and Sophia on the swings. A young mother came over and started chatting with me. "They're so lucky to have such an active grandmother," she said to Caroline. My daughter-in-law's response was like a slap. "Yes, well, sometimes she's a little too active. We have to be careful she doesn't overdo it." Or when I tried to help in the kitchen during family dinners. "Helen, it's better if you don't touch anything. You know my kitchen has its own system." But later, when it was time to do the dishes, my help was certainly welcome. "Do you mind cleaning up while I put the kids to bed?" The final straw before the cruise message had been the incident at Caroline's cousin's communion. I had been invited, or rather, brought along because they needed someone to watch the kids during the ceremony. During the luncheon, all the grandmothers were seated at the main table with the families. They put me at a separate table with children and teenagers. "This way you can keep a better eye on Leo and Sophia," Caroline had explained with that smile I now hated. "Besides, you'd probably be bored with the adult conversation." I spent the entire meal cutting meat for kids, cleaning up spills, and taking one or the other to the bathroom, while from a distance I watched my son laugh and toast with people he barely knew. When I finally got a moment to sit down, Leo ran up to me, "Grandma, Sophia threw up in the bathroom." And off I went again, cleaning up a child's vomit in my good dress, while Caroline chatted animatedly about her upcoming vacation. But perhaps the most painful thing of all was Christmas. Every year, the same routine. I would prepare gifts for everyone, buy special cookies and treats, and decorate my apartment hoping they would come for dinner. And every year, 3 days before, I'd get the same call: "Mom, we've decided to stay home this year. It's just easier for the kids." Last year had been especially cruel. I had spent $400 on gifts, prepared a roast lamb for 6 people, and bought a good bottle of Napa Cabernet. All to receive a text on Christmas Eve: "Leo's not feeling well. Better leave it for another day." The next day, I saw the photos of their perfect Christmas dinner on Instagram. Leo didn't look sick at all as he opened gifts by the tree. They had celebrated without me, simply because they didn't want to include me in their happiness. That afternoon, after putting away all the food that was going to spoil, I sat alone in front of the TV with a plate of reheated lentil soup and cried like I hadn't cried in years. Not for the wasted food or the money spent, but for the stark reality that to my own family, I was disposable. Now, as I finished my coffee in the solitude of my kitchen, I could see with crystal clarity the pattern I had been denying for years. It wasn't just negligence or carelessness. It was systematic contempt. It was the slow erosion of my dignity, drop by drop, day after day. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Caroline: "Helen, can you pick up the kids from school today? Our day got complicated and we can't make it." I read the message 3 times. There was no "please." There was no "would you mind?" Just the automatic assumption that I would be available, as always, like the useful piece of furniture I had been for so many years. For the first time in my life, I typed a response I never thought I would write: "I can't. I have other plans." The reply came immediately: "What plans? Where are you going?" As if I didn't have the right to a life of my own. As if my plans were less important than theirs simply because I was the grandmother. "I have things to do," I replied. "Helen, don't be difficult. It's only an hour of your time." Only an hour. As if the last 10 years hadn't been just 1 hour after another, just one favor after another, just a little help after another. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, Andrew called. "Mom, what's wrong with you? Caroline says you don't want to help with the kids." "It's not that I don't want to help, Andrew. It's that I can't today." "But why? What do you have to do that's so important?" There it was again. The insinuation that my activities were less important than theirs. The implicit suggestion that my time had no value. "I have to go to the travel agency," I said. "For what? Didn't you already cancel the cruise?" There was a long silence. In that silence, something broke inside me for good. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was like a dry branch snapping, a soft crack, and then nothing. "No, Andrew. I didn't cancel it." "What do you mean you didn't?" We talked yesterday." "You told me I wasn't family. That there was no room for me on your perfect vacation. But I never said I was canceling my trip." "Mom, I don't understand." "No, son. You don't understand a lot of things. But it's not my job to explain them to you anymore." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling but firm. I walked to the hallway mirror and looked at myself intently. The red-rimmed eyes, the wrinkles etched by years of worry, the gray hair I had long stopped dyeing because, what's the point, nobody's looking at me anyway. But for the first time in years, I saw more than just an old, discarded woman. I saw a survivor. I saw someone who had given so much love that she had forgotten to save a little for herself. Enough, I told my reflection. Enough is enough. Not even 10 minutes had passed since I hung up when my apartment buzzer rang. 3 long, insistent buzzes, the code Andrew had used since he was a kid so I'd know it was him. My first instinct was to run and open the door, as I had done for 42 years. But something had changed. My feet remained rooted to the kitchen floor. It rang again. This time, 5 buzzes in a row, more aggressive, more demanding. Mom, open the door. I know you're in there. His voice carried through the closed door to my kitchen. He had left work in the middle of the afternoon to come confront me. That should have made me feel important, but all I felt was a mix of sadness and annoyance. I walked slowly to the door, stopping at the peephole. There was my son, scowling, dressed in his construction manager's gear, impatiently checking his watch. Beside him, Caroline held Sophia's hand while Leo kicked an imaginary stone on the floor. They had brought the children as human shields. I opened the door slowly. Hello, Andrew. What is wrong with you? His first words weren't a greeting. Not a, how are you? It was a direct attack. Caroline had to cancel an important meeting because you refused to help with the kids. I looked at Caroline, who avoided my gaze, pretending to be busy wiping something invisible off Sophia's backpack. Hello, Caroline, I said with a surprising calm. Hello, kids. Leo and Sophia ran to me as they always did, but this time I didn't feel the usual wave of joy. I hugged them, yes, but with an emotional distance I had never experienced before. It was as if I were seeing them for the first time not as my adored grandchildren, but as small instruments in their parents' game of manipulation. Grandma, why didn't you come pick us up? Leo asked with that heartbreaking innocence. Mom said you had more important things to do. There it was. Caroline had already started poisoning the children against me. She had planted the seed that their grandmother had abandoned them for something more important. Sometimes adults have commitments, honey, I replied, stroking his hair. Like when you have to go to school instead of playing. Mom, Andrew interrupted, can we talk in private? I gestured toward the living room. Caroline stayed in the entryway with the children, but she could hear every word. I knew that was her intention. Explain to me what's going on with you, Andrew said as soon as we sat down. First the cruise, now this. Are you feeling okay? Have you seen a doctor? Sometimes, at your age. At my age. As if being 68 automatically made me a senile woman incapable of making rational decisions. I'm perfectly fine, Andrew. I'm just starting to value my time. Value your time? Mom, we're your family. What could be more important than helping your family? Perhaps the fact that for years I have put your family before my own life, and now I need to find a balance. Caroline appeared in the doorway, as if waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. Helen, I don't understand why you're suddenly acting as if we're taking advantage of you. We've always treated you with love. Love? Was it love to forget my birthday? Was it love to exclude me from the family cruise that I had paid for? Was it love to treat me like an unpaid housemaid? Caroline, I said with a serenity I didn't know I possessed, when was the last time you asked me how I am? Not about my health to see if I can watch the kids, but how I am, as a person. She stood in silence, her mouth slightly open. When was the last time you invited me to do something because you wanted my company, not because you needed my help? More silence. Helen, don't be so dramatic, she finally said. Of course we care about you. You're part of the family. But not enough to go on the cruise with you. Andrew shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Mom, I already explained the cruise thing. We wanted family intimacy. And what am I? You're my mother, but I'm not family. Your own words. Caroline interjected quickly, Helen, you're misinterpreting everything. What Andrew meant was that we wanted time alone with the kids. As a couple. You know we've been having some problems lately and it was the first time she had admitted they were having marital problems. And she was using it as an excuse to justify my exclusion. And why didn't you just tell me that from the beginning? Why did you have to humiliate me by saying I'm not family? Andrew ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he'd had since he was a boy when he felt cornered. Okay, Mom. Maybe we didn't say it in the best way. But it's not worth all this drama. Not worth it? My voice cracked slightly. Andrew, I sold your grandmother's jewelry to give you the down payment on your apartment. I've paid for Sophia's tutor for 2 years. I paid for Leo's orthodontist. I've been your free nanny, your no-interest bank, your problem solver. Nobody asked you to do that, Caroline cut in sharply. The silence that followed was deafening. Andrew looked at his wife with alarmed eyes, as if she had just crossed a dangerous line. Excuse me? I said very slowly. Caroline realized her mistake, but it was too late. No, I mean, of course we appreciate it, but nobody asked me to, I repeated her words. You're right, Caroline. Nobody asked me to love you all unconditionally. Nobody asked me to sacrifice my savings for you. Nobody asked me to dedicate my life to being the perfect grandmother. I stood up from the couch, feeling a mental clarity I hadn't experienced in years. And nobody asked me to keep doing it, either. Mom, don't be like this, Andrew pleaded. You know we love you. You love me? When was the last time you called just to see how I was? When was the last time you remembered my birthday without me having to remind you? They were both quiet. Just then, Sophia came running in from the hallway. Grandma, are you coming on the cruise with us? Daddy says no, but I want you to come. My heart broke seeing her innocent little face. She was the only one who truly wanted my company with no strings attached. No, sweetie. The grown-ups are going to travel alone this time. But why? Don't you love us anymore? Caroline quickly took Sophia by the hand. Come on, Sophia. Grandma's a little tired today. Tired. As if my feelings were just fatigue that could be fixed with a nap. I'm not tired, I said clearly, so Sophia could hear me. I'm just learning to say no when something hurts me. Helen, please, Caroline whispered urgently. Don't do this in front of the children. Do what? Teach them that older people have feelings too? Show them that no one should accept being treated without respect. Andrew stood up abruptly. Fine, Mom. I see you're determined to play the victim. When you're over this tantrum, give us a call. A tantrum? 48 years after I gave birth to him, my emotional pain was a tantrum. Andrew, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, it's not a tantrum. It's dignity. Something it's taken me far too long to find. They headed for the door, Caroline dragging the children, who didn't understand why the visit had been so short. Grandma, Leo shouted from the hallway, are you coming to my soccer game on Saturday? Before I could answer, I heard Caroline's voice, I don't think Grandma can make it, Leo. She's very busy with her important things. The door closed with a sharp click that echoed through the apartment. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by a silence that, for the first time in years, didn't feel painful. It was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of unwanted loneliness, but the silence of peace. For the first time in decades, I didn't run after them to apologize. I didn't pick up the phone to call and smooth things over. I didn't blame myself for hurting their feelings. I sat on my couch and, for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. The next morning, I woke up without the usual knot in my stomach. For the first time in months, I hadn't spent the night tossing and turning over some problem of Andrew's or worrying if I had done something wrong. I had simply slept. A deep, restorative sleep I couldn't remember having in years. I got up slowly, enjoying the luxury of not being in a hurry for anyone or anything. I didn't have to make breakfast for the grandkids, I didn't have to watch my phone in case they needed something, I didn't have to plan my day around the needs of others. As I made coffee, I realized it was the first time in decades that my morning routine belonged completely to me. I put on music, something I rarely did because it was distracting when they were on the phone or because the kids needed to concentrate on their homework. I chose Aretha Franklin, that powerful voice that had always given me strength but that I had silenced so as not to inconvenience anyone. I poured my coffee into the good cup, the porcelain one with flowers that I saved for special occasions that never came. Today was a special occasion, it was the first day of my new life. While I ate breakfast, I made a mental list of all the things I had stopped doing to be constantly available for my family. I had given up the ballroom dancing classes I loved so much because Tuesdays are for watching Leo. I had stopped meeting up with my old colleagues from work because weekends are for family. I had sold my sewing machine because I don't have space anymore after turning my spare room into a bedroom for the grandkids to use when they slept over, which had happened exactly 3 times in 5 years. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of the dance studio where I had taken classes for years. Good morning, is Carmen there? This is Helen Miller. I was in your ballroom classes a few years ago. Helen. How are you? We've missed you around here. Those simple words touched me more deeply than all the mechanical I love yous from my family. I'm good, Carmen. Are you still holding classes on Tuesday afternoons? Yes, from 5 to 7. Are you thinking of coming back? I'm thinking of starting over. Next, I called Maria, my sister in Mexico City. It had been 2 months since our last video call because Sundays are always busy with the family. Helen. What a surprise. How are you? Is everything okay? Hi, Maria. Do you have time to talk? I have so much to tell you. For the next hour, I told her everything. The text about the cruise, the confrontation the day before, my decisions. Maria listened in silence, interrupting only to murmur, I knew it, or, it's about time. Helen, she said when I finished, I've been waiting for this call for years. I knew one day you would realize they were using you. Why didn't you tell me more clearly? Because you had to reach this conclusion on your own. If I had told you, you would have defended them and pushed me away too. She was right. For years I had dismissed her subtle comments about Andrew and Caroline, interpreting her concern as criticism or envy. You know what's the saddest part, Maria? It's not so much what they did that hurts, but realizing how much of my life I've wasted because I was afraid of losing them. But you haven't wasted it, Helen. You've just postponed it. At 68, you still have so much life left to live. After hanging up with Maria, I went to the bedroom mirror and studied myself. For years, I had worn muted colors, styled my hair practically but without flair, and chosen clothes that were comfortable but unflattering. Why get dressed up if I'm just going to clean the house or watch the kids, I had told myself for years. I opened my closet and searched in the back, where I had stored some clothes I loved but had stopped wearing because I considered them too much for my life as an available grandma. I pulled out a cobalt blue dress I had bought years ago, the one Caroline had commented was a bit loud for a woman your age. I tried it on. It fit perfectly. The color made my gray eyes look blue, and the cut flattered my figure more than I remembered. When had I started to believe that being a grandmother meant becoming invisible? I went out into the street with a strange sense of freedom. I didn't have to be anywhere at a specific time. I didn't have to carry bags of toys to entertain anyone. I didn't have to plan my route around stops at pharmacies or grocery stores for others. I walked aimlessly through the streets of my neighborhood, rediscovering it. I stopped at a bookstore I hadn't entered in years and bought a novel I wanted to read, without having to justify the expense by wondering if that money would be better spent on the grandkids. At a coffee shop I'd never been to, I ordered a latte and a croissant. I sat by the window and simply watched people go by. An elderly couple walked hand in hand, laughing about something. A woman my age was walking her small dog alone, stopping to chat with other pet owners. College students were animatedly discussing something written in a notebook. Life was still happening all around me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a spectator. I felt like a part of it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Andrew. Mom, I hope you've had time to reflect on yesterday. Caroline is very upset and the kids are asking why we're not seeing you. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I finished my coffee, paid my bill calmly, and kept walking. I made my way to Prospect Park, the park where I had taken Leo and Sophia so many times. But this time, I didn't go to the playground. I headed for the boathouse, a place I had loved since I was young but rarely visited because the kids get bored there. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, admiring the architectural beauty without having to explain it to anyone, without having to entertain anyone, without having to run after anyone. An older woman sat down on the other end of the bench. She had a book in her hands and a thermos of coffee. It's so peaceful today, isn't it? She commented with a smile. Yes, very peaceful, I replied. Do you come here to read often? Almost every day. When my kids were little, I never had time to read. Now that they're grown with their own lives, I've rediscovered the pleasure of reading without interruptions. Don't your children live nearby? My son lives in California and my daughter is in London. We see each other for Christmas and in the summer. It made me very sad at first, but now I understand it's natural. Birds have to learn to fly on their own. And you don't feel lonely? Sometimes. But I've learned to distinguish between being alone and feeling lonely. They are two very different things. Her words resonated deeply with me. For years, I had confused the two, filling my physical solitude with constant availability for my family, not realizing that I felt lonelier than ever when surrounded by people who needed me but didn't value me. How did you do it? I asked her. How did you learn to be okay with yourself? Little by little. First, I allowed myself to be sad about the empty nest. Then I started doing small things for myself, reading a chapter, having a quiet coffee, taking a walk without rushing. And then I realized I had been putting off things I really wanted to do for years. Like what? Learning Italian, for example. I always said I was too old, but I signed up for classes at 75. I also started traveling alone. Last year I went to Florence. It was wonderful. Traveling alone? The idea seemed both terrifying and thrilling. Weren't you scared? Terrified. But I discovered that most of my fears were just in my head. And that being older has its advantages. I no longer care what other people think of me. We talked for an hour. Her name was Patricia. She had been a widow for 10 years, and it had taken her a long time to learn to enjoy her own company. When she left, she gave me the name of a women's group that organized trips and cultural activities. Just in case you're interested, she said with a knowing smile. You never know when you might need a new adventure. I walked home at dusk, feeling for the first time in years that I had lived the day instead of just surviving it. My phone had 3 missed calls from Andrew and 2 texts from Caroline. I didn't read them. Instead, I made dinner for one, with no leftovers planned for anyone else. I set the table nicely, lit a candle, and poured myself a glass of wine I had been saving for a special occasion. The special occasion was me. It was my first dinner as a free woman. On Friday morning, 3 days before the cruise, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Caroline's mother, Carol, from Ohio. "Helen, dear, how are you?" Caroline told me what's going on and I'm very worried. Carol had always been polite to me, but her visits were rare and brief. For her to be calling now could only mean one thing: they had sent in the heavy artillery to make me change my mind. "I'm fine, Carol. How are you?" "Look, Helen, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Caroline is a wreck. She says you've suddenly become very difficult, that you don't want to help with the kids, that you've cancelled their vacation." There it was, Caroline's version. I was the villain who had ruined their family vacation on a whim. "Carol, did Caroline tell you that they told me I wasn't family? That after I paid for half the trip, they uninvited me?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Well, she told me there was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Carol. It was pure and simple contempt." "Helen, dear, sometimes young people don't watch their words. But family is the most important thing. You can't break your relationship with your son over a heated moment. Family is the most important thing." How many times had I heard that phrase to justify swallowing humiliation? "Carol, would you allow yourself to be treated the way I've been treated?" "Helen, I raised 5 children. Believe me, I've been through all sorts of slights. But in the end, there are children. We are the mothers, we have to be the understanding ones. Always us. Always the mothers who had to give in, understand, forgive, forget." After that conversation, I knew a storm was coming. I wasn't wrong. On Saturday afternoon, as I was returning from my first ballroom dance class in years, I found the whole family waiting for me on my stoop. Andrew, Caroline, the kids, and to my surprise, Caroline's parents were there too, having driven all the way from Ohio specifically for this family intervention. Helen, Richard, Caroline's father, greeted me with his deep, retired teacher voice. "Can we come up and talk? I think this has gone far enough." The kids ran to me as always, but this time I could see the confusion in their eyes. They had been dragged into an adult conflict they didn't understand. "Hello, family," I said with a calm that surprised me. "Of course, let's go up." In the elevator, the silence was thick. Leo, who was 8, was the only one who spoke. "Grandma, why are Mom and Dad angry with you?" "We're not angry," Caroline said quickly. "We just want to clear up a misunderstanding." In my living room, which suddenly seemed too small for so many people, 2 camps were clearly formed. Caroline and her parents sat on the sofa. Andrew stood next to them, arms crossed. The children sat on the floor, near me. "Helen," Richard began in his authoritative tone, "we've come because we believe this is getting out of hand. Caroline has told us your version and hers, and we're sure it's a misunderstanding that can be resolved." "My version?" I asked. "And what is my version, according to Caroline?" Caroline shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "Helen, don't make this more difficult. My parents came to help fix this." "Answer my question, Caroline." "What did you tell them I said?" That you felt excluded from the trip and that's why you cancelled our reservations." "And did you tell them that Andrew texted me saying I wasn't family?" Carol intervened quickly. "Helen, young people sometimes don't express themselves well. But cancelling their vacation is a very disproportionate revenge." "Revenge? Taking back my money and using it for my own enjoyment was revenge?" "Carol, I didn't cancel their vacation. I cancelled my financial contribution to their vacation. Those are 2 very different things." Andrew exploded. "It's the same thing. We can't go without your money." "Exactly," I said with perfect serenity. "You can't go without my money. But since I'm not family, according to your own words, I don't see why I should be funding a vacation from which I'm excluded." "Mom, I already apologized for that." "No, Andrew. You never apologized. What you said was that maybe you didn't express it well. But you didn't apologize for the substance of it." Richard cleared his throat, resuming his role as mediator. "Helen, we understand you were hurt. But think about the children. They're not to blame for this situation." There it was, the low blow I had been waiting for. The children as emotional weapons. "You're right, Richard. The children are not to blame. But it's also not my responsibility to finance their parents' family vacations." "But you've always been a part of everything," Caroline yelled, finally losing her composure. "You've always been available. You can't just change the rules of the game overnight." There was the naked truth. I had always been available, I had always contributed financially, I had always been their infallible resource. And now that I refused to continue being their emotional and financial ATM, I was the one being irrational. "Caroline," I said, standing up from my armchair, "you changed the rules of the game when you decided I wasn't important enough to go on the trip that I myself was paying for. This is ridiculous." Andrew walked to the window, clearly frustrated. "You're acting like a spurned teenager." I walked over to the desk where I kept my documents and pulled out a folder I had prepared that morning. "You want to talk about ridiculous? I have all the receipts from the last 5 years right here. I opened the folder on the coffee table, spreading out invoices, bank transfers, receipts. Leo's daycare, $2,100. Sophia's SAT prep, $6,000. Leo's orthodontist, $3,000. Andrew's car repair, $2,000. Down payment on the apartment, $6,000. Christmas, birthdays, various gifts, approximately another $4,000. The silence was sepulchral. Even the children had stopped moving. Total, $23,100 in 5 years. Over $23,000 from a Social Security check of $1,200 a month. Carol stared at the papers with wide eyes. And that's not counting the hours of free childcare, the dinners I wasn't invited to but helped finance, the celebrations where I was the nanny but not the guest of honor. Caroline had turned pale. Helen, we never asked you. Exactly, I cut her off. You never asked me for anything. You just assumed it was my obligation to give everything without receiving anything in return. Not even basic respect. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Helen, I understand your frustration, but... No, Richard. You don't understand. Because you have never been treated like an ATM by your own children. You have never been excluded from family celebrations after paying for them. I walked over to the shelf with the family photos and picked one up in particular, the one from Leo's last birthday. You see this photo? I'm not in it because I was in the kitchen serving the cake that I had bought for a party where I arrived as an employee and left as an employee. I tore the photo in half in front of everyone. No more. Sophia started to cry. Why are you tearing up the pictures, Grandma? I knelt beside her, taking her small hands in mine. Because sometimes, honey, when things hurt us, we have to stop looking at them so we can heal. Don't you love us anymore? Leo asked, his eyes filled with tears. I love you both so much. But I have to love myself, too. And for a long time, I forgot how to do that. Caroline stood up abruptly. Helen, this is emotional manipulation. You're using the children to punish us. No, Caroline. You have used the children to manipulate me for years. I am just being honest for the first time. Andrew approached me, his expression pleading. Mom, I promise things will change. We'll all go on the cruise, have a great time, and start over. Start over? Like the time you promised to pay me back for the car in 2 months? Like when Caroline promised that watching Sophia would only be for a few weeks. This is different, he insisted. You're right. It is different. Because this time, I've changed too. I walked to the front door and opened it. I believe this conversation is over. Helen, Carol stood up, shocked. You can't throw your family out. I'm not throwing them out. I am simply making it clear that my home, which I pay for with my pension, is my space. And it is no longer available for meetings where you come to tell me how I'm supposed to feel. One by one, they filed out. The children crying, Caroline indignant, Andrew confused, Caroline's parents clearly uncomfortable. Andrew was the last one at the door. Mom, he said in a broken voice, if you keep this up, you're going to lose us for good. I looked him in the eyes, those eyes that had been my world for 42 years. Andrew, I lost you a long time ago. I've only just realized it now. I closed the door gently and leaned against it. For the first time in years, my home was truly my own. On Monday morning, the day of departure, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't experienced in decades, pure excitement. Not the nervous excitement of someone about to look after grandchildren or solve other people's problems, but the genuine excitement of someone about to experience something beautiful for herself. I took my time getting ready. I took a long bath with aromatic salts that had been stored away for months for a special occasion. I carefully applied my makeup, using the red lipstick that Caroline had once criticized as being too loud for a woman your age. I put on the cobalt blue dress and the comfortable yet elegant shoes I had bought the day before. When I looked in the mirror before leaving, I saw a woman who had been hidden for years. A woman with a sparkle in her eyes, a desire to live, and a curiosity for what was to come. The suitcase had been packed since Friday. A small suitcase, just for me, with no room for gifts for others, no extra clothes in case someone needed something. For the first time in my adult life, I had packed a bag thinking only of my own needs and desires. The taxi arrived on time. The driver, a very kind older man, helped me with the suitcase. Going on vacation, ma'am? Yes, I replied with a smile that came naturally. I'm going on a cruise. That's wonderful. Are you going with family? No, I said, without a hint of sadness. I'm going alone. Even better. The best adventures are the ones you have on your own. During the ride to the Cape Liberty cruise port, I watched the city wake up. The streets of New York that had seen me walk for 68 years, burdened with other people's worries, now saw me leaving with light luggage and a heavy dose of hope. My phone had been buzzing since 7 in the morning. Messages from Andrew, from Caroline, even from Carol. I didn't read them. For the first time in my life, I prioritized my own peace of mind over the guilt they were trying to plant in me. Arriving at the port, the magnificence of the cruise ship took my breath away. It was much more imposing than I had imagined, with its multiple decks and its windows glistening under the Atlantic sun. It was my ship. My adventure. My decision. In the boarding line, I observed the other families. Grandparents loaded down with extra bags for demanding grandchildren, mothers organizing documents for the whole family, fathers checking schedules. And there I was, a woman with a single suitcase, a calm smile, and all the freedom in the world. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," the boarding agent greeted me. "Welcome aboard. Suite 801, top deck. Suite 801. The best category available. The one I had booked after years of settling for the basics so I could spend on others." My cabin was spectacular. A suite with a private balcony, a king-size bed, a separate living area, and a view of the ocean that was breathtaking. I sat on the chair on the balcony and, for the first time in years, I cried with happiness. I cried for the woman I had been, always worried about pleasing others. I cried for the lost years of being invisible. And I cried with joy for the woman I was becoming. That first afternoon, I explored the ship with the curiosity of a child. I discovered there were dance classes, nightly shows, a library, a spa, multiple restaurants. A whole world of possibilities I could enjoy without having to think about whether others would like it or if I could afford it after spending on my family. At the main dining room, I was assigned to a table for 4. I felt awkward at first, but my table mate soon arrived: Dorothy, a cheerful widow from Charleston who was on her second solo trip; Robert, a retired professor from Philadelphia whose wife had passed away the previous year and who had decided to fulfill his dream of seeing the Caribbean; and Amy, a 55-year-old divorcee celebrating her freedom after 30 years of an unhappy marriage. "First time traveling alone?" Dorothy asked as we toasted with champagne. "Yes, and I'm equal parts terrified and thrilled." "That's normal," laughed Amy. I cried for the entire first day of my first solo trip. I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Now, I can't imagine traveling any other way. "Why is that?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because when you travel alone, you truly travel. You're not worrying about whether others are bored, if they're hungry, if they want to leave. You only listen to your own desires." Robert nodded. "My wife always wanted to go to the same places, do the same things. When she died, I thought I'd never travel again. But I discovered I could go to places that had always interested me." During dinner, we shared our stories. Dorothy had raised 5 children and had spent 40 years doing nothing for herself until she was widowed. Amy had lived for 3 decades adapting to the tastes of a husband who never valued her sacrifices. Robert had postponed all his personal dreams to build a career that would provide security for his family. We had all reached the same conclusion: we had mistaken love for self-erasure. "The funny thing is," Dorothy mused, "my children are better off now that I have my own life. Before, I used to overwhelm them with my constant availability. Now that I have my own things going on, our conversations are more interesting." "Really?" I asked, hopeful. "Absolutely. When you only live for others, you become boring. When you have your own life, you have interesting things to talk about." That night, on my private balcony, I drank a glass of wine while gazing at the infinite sea. The stars shone brighter than I had seen them in years, living in a city full of artificial lights and worries that kept me from looking up at the sky. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Maria in Mexico City. "How's your first night of freedom?" "It's magical," I replied. "I understand now what you used to tell me about living for yourself." "And how do you feel?" "Like I've been asleep for years and I've just woken up." On the second day, I signed up for a salsa class. I hadn't danced in decades, but my body remembered the rhythm. The instructor, a young Cuban man named Miguel, complimented my natural elegance. "Mrs. Helen, you have real soul. I can tell dancing is in your blood." For years, I had suppressed that part of myself because it wasn't appropriate for a grandmother or because it set a bad example for the grandkids. Now, moving to the rhythm of the music, I remembered who I was before I became the invisible woman who existed only to serve others. In the salsa class, I met Susan, a woman my age traveling with a group of friends from Chicago. They had organized the trip to celebrate all turning 70. "We decided it was time to spend our money on ourselves," she explained as we practiced a basic step. "For decades, we've funded weddings, baptisms, college educations. Now it's our turn." "And what did your family say?" "At first, they were scandalized. How can you spend so much money on a whim?" But when they saw how happy we were, they even became a little envious. That afternoon, while I was sunbathing on the deck with my new group of friends, I got a call from Andrew. This time, I decided to answer. "Mom, where are you? We went to your apartment and you're not home." "I'm on the cruise, Andrew." Silence. "What do you mean you're on the cruise? You went by yourself?" "Yes, I went by myself." And I'm having a wonderful time. But Mom, we wanted to talk to you, to fix things. Andrew, for years I've been available to fix things. Now, I'm enjoying my life. When are you coming back? In a week. And then what? Then I'll continue living my life. If you want to be a part of it with respect and genuine affection, you will be welcome. If not, I'm okay with that too. Mom, I miss you, he said, his voice sounding sincere for the first time in years. I miss you too, son. But I miss the son who respected me, not the one who used me. After I hung up, Susan looked at me with admiration. That was perfect. Firm but loving. You think so? I'm sure of it. Sometimes you have to step away for others to appreciate what they had. That night, at the tango show, something magical happened. The lead dancer, a mature woman in her 50s, performed a piece about rebirth. As I watched her move with the strength and elegance that only lived years can give, I understood something fundamental: youth wasn't the only time to shine. There was a special beauty in the mature woman who had learned to value herself. During the dance, our eyes met, and she smiled at me as if she knew exactly what I was going through. At the end of the show, she approached our table. Ma'am, I saw you shining throughout the entire performance. Are you a dancer? I used to be, I answered shyly. The passion for dance never leaves you. It's in the soul. She invited me up on stage. I refused at first, but my new friends encouraged me. With my heart pounding, I approached the stage. The music began, slow, deep. And without knowing how, my feet began to move. My arms found the air, my back straightened, my head held high with pride. It wasn't the perfect technique of my 20s, but it was something more powerful. It was the expression of a woman who had been reborn. The audience applauded enthusiastically. But more important than the applause was the feeling of being completely alive for the first time in decades. When I came down from the stage, I had tears in my eyes, but they were tears of pure joy. Mrs. Helen, Miguel, the salsa instructor, said to me, "You don't need lessons. What you need is to keep dancing." That night on my balcony, as the ship sailed toward the Bahamas, I understood that this trip wasn't a vacation. It was my rebirth. 6 months after the cruise, I'm sitting on my renovated balcony, watching the sunset over the New York skyline. The Helen who wrote to-do lists for others no longer exists. In her place is a woman who asks herself every morning, what do I want to do for myself today? The apartment has completely changed. Where there used to be family photos that reminded me of my role as a dutiful grandmother, there are now paintings I bought at a local art gallery. Where there was a table piled high with bills for other people's expenses, there are now books about places I want to visit. The corner I had designated for the grandchildren to sleep in has become my sewing studio, where I've taken up the passion I abandoned 20 years ago. The sewing machine I sold for lack of space has been replaced by a better one. Now I make clothes for myself, bags to give to my new friends, and tablecloths for the table where I eat my peaceful dinner each night. My hands, which for decades only served to do things for others, now create beauty for my own enjoyment. Dorothy, Amy, and Susan have become my new chosen family. We meet every Thursday for dinner to share our small weekly adventures. On Fridays, I go to tango classes with Isabella, my teacher, who turns out to be a woman my age who also rediscovered her passion after raising 3 children. On Tuesdays, I continue with ballroom dancing, where I'm the most consistent and enthusiastic student. I've traveled 3 more times in these 6 months. A weekend trip to Charleston with Susan, where we ate at expensive restaurants without feeling guilty. 5 days in Boston by myself, wandering through museums and bookstores at my own pace, without having to explain to anyone why I wanted to spend 2 hours looking at the architecture of a church. And a month ago, a week in Florence with the women's group that Patricia had recommended to me in Prospect Park. It was magical to talk about Renaissance art with women who, like me, had postponed their thirst for beauty to attend to the needs of others. Each trip has taught me something new about myself. In Charleston, I discovered that I love waking up early to watch the sunrise over the ocean. In Boston, I learned that I can spend hours lost in a bookstore without ever getting bored. In Florence, I understood that I have a good eye for art and that my opinions on painting are as valid as any experts. Maria and I talk every Sunday via video call, and now our conversations are different. She no longer calls to console or advise me, but to share joy. I tell her about my adventures, she tells me about hers. We've decided to meet in Rome next summer. It will be the first time we've seen each other in 15 years, and it will be as 2 friends, not as sisters bound by family obligation. As for Andrew, things have changed, but not in the way I expected. The first week after the cruise, he called every day. First with reproaches, "Mom, you're being very selfish. The kids are constantly asking for you." Then with please, go back to how you were before. We miss you. Finally, with attempts at emotional blackmail, if you don't go back to helping us, the kids will grow up without knowing their grandmother. I maintained the same response. Andrew, my door is open for visits that show me respect, not for demands or reproaches. For a month, he didn't come. Caroline made sure to filter my calls to the grandkids, sending me the occasional voice message of them asking me to come see them, but always accompanied by comments like, "Grandma is just very busy with her things." One day, Leo showed up at my door alone. He had the keys I had given him years ago to make him feel at home. He came up and found me sewing. "Grandma, why don't you come to our house anymore?" I sat down at his level, looking him in the eye. "Leo, honey, do you miss me because you love me, or because you miss having someone pick you up from school?" He thought for a moment, with the brutal honesty of a child. "Both," he finally admitted. "And what if I told you that you can come visit me here whenever you want, but that I can't do all the things I used to do anymore?" "Why not?" "Because for many years, I forgot to take care of myself. And now I'm learning how to do that." Leo stayed with me that afternoon. I taught him how to use the sewing machine to make a pencil case. We didn't talk about his parents, we didn't mention any conflicts. We just spent time together, with no hidden agendas. When Andrew came to pick him up, he found his son happy, creating something with his own hands. "Look, Dad, Grandma is teaching me how to sew. I'm going to make a superhero cape." Andrew looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in years, respect. "Can we talk?" he asked when Leo went to the bathroom. "Of course. Mom, I've started seeing a therapist." I was surprised. Andrew had always considered therapy a waste of time. "Caroline and I are in a crisis. And part of the problem is that we never learned to be independent. We always had you to solve everything." It was the first time I had ever heard him acknowledge something like that. The therapist asked me a question that really hit me hard. "What do you give to your mother besides problems to solve or bills to pay?" "And what did you answer?" I couldn't answer. I realized that for years, I've had no idea what your life is like, what you enjoy doing, what dreams you have. Andrew. "No, Mom, let me finish. I was a selfish son. And Caroline. Caroline grew up thinking that mothers exist to serve their children forever. But you're not just my mother. You're Helen, a woman with a right to her own life." Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. Not tears of sadness, but of relief. My son finally saw me as a person. "Do you think we can start over?" he asked. "Without you having to do anything for us. Just being a real family." "I would love to try," I said. Now, Andrew comes to see me once a week, alone. Sometimes he brings the kids, sometimes he comes by himself. We talk about the books I'm reading, the places I want to visit, my dance classes. He tells me about his work plans, his fears as a father, his taste in music that I never knew about. Caroline is still cold toward me, but I don't care anymore. I've learned that I can't force anyone to love me, and that it's okay if not all relationships work out. The grandkids come over some Saturday afternoons. I'm no longer their primary caregiver, but I'm their grandmother who teaches them special things. Leo is learning to sew, and Sophia wants me to teach her how to dance. They are short but genuine visits, without the burden of constant responsibility. The most important change isn't in my relationship with them, but in my relationship with myself. I have learned that chosen solitude is very different from imposed loneliness. I've discovered that getting older doesn't mean becoming invisible, but finding a new way to shine. I have understood that true love does not demand self-erasure. Some nights, when I'm eating alone at my nicely set table, with candles lit and a glass of wine, I think about the Helen from a year ago. That woman who ate leftovers standing up in the kitchen, who woke up every morning wondering what other people's problems she would have to solve, who had forgotten she had the right to want things for herself. I don't pity her. I understand her. She did what she thought she had to do for love. But I also celebrate that I had the courage to change before it was too late. Yesterday, while I was walking through Prospect Park after my ballroom class, I ran into Patricia, the woman who had told me about traveling alone on that first afternoon of freedom. "Helen, you look radiant. How's the new life?" "Wonderful," I answered with complete honesty. "Thank you for that advice about distinguishing between being alone and feeling lonely. And you don't feel lonely anymore?" "Sometimes, I do. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. I've learned that solitude can be a place of peace, not punishment." As I walked home, I reflected on everything I had gained by losing the family that took me for granted. I had gained time for myself, money for my own tastes, energy for my passions, and above all, respect for my own existence. This morning, while having breakfast on my renovated terrace, a message arrived from Susan. "Helen, are you up for a Mediterranean cruise in November?" "Dorothy, Amy, and I have already signed up." I replied immediately, "Of course. What suite should I book?" Because now I know that I deserve the best suite, the best table, the best life my money can buy. Because I've learned that taking care of myself isn't selfishness, it's survival. Because I understand that only when I value myself can others learn to value me too. Life at 68 can be the beginning of the best chapter of your existence, if you have the courage to claim your right to live it. Have you ever been in a similar situation, or do you know someone who has? Tell me about it in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it. Because it's never too late to start living the life you deserve.